Here is the scooter of 1964. Mods on board. Travelling down the road to Brighton. Icons of public disorder. Customised threat.
Baby, I'll be good, and I'll treat you like I should. If I ever get my hands on you.
A mode of transport now on the wrong side of the rails. The highway leads right through the centre of the swinging 60s. But the scooter is about to take a side turning. Oh, how different from the grand plan it all is. The scooter didn't belong to the mods. It belonged to Italy. To be exact, post-war Italy. From 1945 to 1960, the Italian scooter eclipsed the traditional motorcycle. In 1959, over half the 330,000 new two-wheelers in Britain were scooters. While the mods and rockers clashes of 63 and 64 might have been overhyped by the media, the scooter mania of the 50s was more than real. Two companies, Piaggio and Innocenti, orchestrated a marketing plan that literally shifted millions of their unique products, the Vespa and the Lambretta. Italy in 1945 was in ruins. Daylight bombing by the Americans had destroyed the country's infrastructure. Most of the manufacturing areas had been blitzed. Roads and railways had been blown up to halt the retreat of the Germans. The whole country had to be rebuilt.
You've got to imagine what Italy was like in about 1946. It was a country going through what the Italians call, the ricostruzione, the reconstruction period. All the great architects and designers of the day were devoting themselves to public service housing schemes. It was a country which had sort of thrown off the dark mantle of fascism and was trying busily to modernize itself. I mean, Italy had its industrial revolution in about 1946, not in 1780.
The Piaggio factory at Pontedera near Milan was a mass of rubble in 1945. Enrico Piaggio's company started in aviation in 1915 and ended up making bombers for the Italian Air Force during the war. Now, they had to quickly find a product for their workforce to make. Supported financially by the Americans, the Italian government was offering grants to companies which could provide basic transport. Piaggio decided on a short-term project to make a cheap two-wheeler that could be operated by anyone who could navigate the potholed roads. The project still goes on. The company had been making 98cc engines which the Air Force used to start aeroplanes. The first Vespa appeared in 1946 with a 98cc engine. The Vespa was the most radical design for a two-wheeler ever seen, a complete departure from the norm. It was designed by Corradino Descagno, Italy's foremost helicopter designer. His complete lack of experience in motorcycle design meant he approached the problem from first principles.
Ho passato delle notti insonne per vedere di inquadrare bene il problema nel modo più chiaro, più elementare. E allora a un certo punto si sono delineate delle idee e io mi messi al tavolo del disegno e così cercai di inquadrare il problema in questo modo. La persona seduta comodamente su una specie, sul sedile, vero? Ho disposto simmetricamente alla persona due ruote, ho messo un parafanco dal sedile che copre la ruota, ho disposto uno sterzo in corrispondenza della ruota anteriore, automaticamente la forma nasce.
It's genuinely one of the very, very great product designs. Two entirely different sources of inspiration make the Vespa into the very special machine it is. I mean, one is aesthetic and the other one is technical. I mean, the aesthetic aspects of it, here is a wonderfully willful contrivance, an expression of pure sculptural form. It's a work of art, a small work of art in a way. But I think he also used certain specifics of aerospace technology to make the thing. I mean, features like stub axles, the monocoque construction, and the aerodynamic details were derived straight from aerospace practice.
A great deal of reinvention has gone on with the Vespa's history. The line has always been that Descagno was trying to make a two-wheeled car and got it right first time. Actually, his first design, the Paperino, the Italian word for Donald Duck, was a failure, and only 100 were made. His second design, the Vespa, Italian for wasp, was unveiled in 1946 to great acclaim. It soon had a competitor.
1947, the first Lambretta is born. An engine and 2 wheels, just right for everyone coping with the hardships of post-war travel. Already contemplated during the war period, designed as a far-sighted industrial project, constantly perfected technically and stylistically, the Lambretta has quickly become a part of the everyday scene, an exquisitely social appliance.
The Lambretta A was a very radical design. It was really more akin to the pre-war Bauhaus chairs than almost anything else. It had lots of chromium tubes, but the unique thing about the Lambretta, and the Lambretta D is the last example, and many people would say the last true Lambretta, it was that they never produced enclosed machines initially.
The Lambretta project was started by Ferdinando Innocenti at the same time as the Vespa. Like Piaggio, Innocenti had a long history in heavy manufacturing. They too used existing technologies and American money to give them a head start. Again, the scooter project was only to be a temporary sideline. The Vespa and the Lambretta together remobilized Italy. They cost less than cars, but still weren't that cheap. Nevertheless, hundreds of thousands of Italians made great sacrifices just to have one. The Vespa and Lambretta were irresistible. Designed to be stylish in a world of post-war drudgery, they became symbols of national hope and optimism.
If you look at the engine, the ribbing on the casting is done to give the whole thing, to increase the feeling of compactness in the design. And on this side, you can see the attempt to produce images of turbines and aero wheels, these heavily dished wheels, very much like racing car wheels of the period. These things were extremely potent images at that time and gave the machine a great sort of market appeal, particularly to people who didn't like motorcycles, but who wanted a machine which was very futuristic. In addition to that, the science fiction images of the time were very, very potent. I mean, if one thinks of Dan Dare and the Mekong travelling around on these apparently magic machines that floated across the ground.
From 1950 to 51, there was an increase of 50% in road traffic in Italy. Of that, 80% were scooters. Underpinning the Vespa and Lambretta's success as aesthetic objects was the fact that they were 2 solid products made by 2 essentially modern companies. Piaggio and Innocenti were not typical of the indigenous motorcycle industry. Up until then, manufacturers offered small production runs of hand-built machines. Piaggio and Innocenti brought big business to Italian 2-wheeler production. Both were familiar with conveyor belt mass production techniques. They installed up-to-the-minute equipment. Right from the start, they had volume production and relatively low costs. Their products were totally unlike motorcycles of the day and carried none of the negative associations.
Most people who've been used to using motorbikes, I mean, both 50 years ago and now, are used to having them leak, explode and drip all over them, and generally they're incontinent machines. But of course the Italians are a vain and self-regarding people who are quite properly so, and such a device would not be popular amongst people who like to have creases in their trousers and, you know, like to wear silk even when they go to work. And of course the Vespa's leg guards. These are things too which speak about the, you know, Italian vanity and pride of appearance. Not only is the all-enclosing bodywork paid tribute to aerodynamic science, it also makes considerable concessions to personal style and vanity, and that you can ride a Vespa and not end up with oil stains all over your bottom.
Motorcyclists of the time relished the prospect of doing the necessary weekly maintenance and repairs. Scooterists, on the other hand, were not expected to endure the same incessant tinkering as addicted enthusiasts.
The motor scooter was a complete product. It wasn't a proprietary engine lashed to the rear wheel by a chain. It was designed from the scratch so that, in the case, for example, of the Lambretta, the compact quality of the entire design was the first thing that you spotted. And I think that's what distinguished it from all other motorcycles. This made it very attractive to people who really had no interest whatsoever in motorcycling. They went out, they bought something which was more akin to a car.
The Vespa and Lambretta ended up looking virtually identical, but their origins were quite different. Piaggio's expertise was in pressed steel construction. The Vespa's body is made from pressed steel sections welded together to form one stress-bearing shell, a monocoque. All other components are bolted to it. The Vespa is a snail, an invertebrate. The Lambretta, however, has a spine. Innocenti's background in steel tubing manufacture meant that Lambretta evolved with a central load-bearing tube to which were attached footboards, leg shields and engine. The Vespa had an elegantly designed engine. The motor and gearbox sat side by side, the whole thing cooled by a fan. This compact unit was connected directly to the rear wheel and moved up and down as part of the suspension system. While the Lambretta was no less unique, it went through a number of design changes before settling on a combined engine and rear wheel unit with chain drive. Both companies tried to outpace each other by bringing more and more powerful models. Soon, the 35-mile-per-hour scooter could do over 70. Lambretta won the power battle, but they had to concede to the popularity of the enclosed look. They stopped producing open models in 1958. The macho motorcycling diehards were appalled by scooters. They claimed the engine over the back wheel made the machines unstable. But the scooter had always been maligned. Even before the war, there had been a few basic designs for scooters, all low-powered and mostly aimed at women. They were seen as an adjunct to mainstream machines. The bigotry persisted. In Britain, dyed-in-the-wool motorcycle dealers refused to stock the Lambretta and Vespa.
I have this uncle works in my dad's motorbike shop. He just won't touch scooters. He'd resigned before he mended one. Scooters are decadent or something.
Capri's made for the family outing.
Motorcycle manufacturers were forced to take the threat seriously as scooter sales rocketed, boosted by another new fad, hire purchase.
£9.10 for your first down payment, small instalment.
Belatedly, other manufacturers got in on the act. Largely, it was a disaster story.
They were exactly what scooters shouldn't have been. They were proprietary engines, largely proprietary engines, lashed by chain to the rear wheel. And what the bodywork did was hid this terrible mess.
Its British imitators didn't truly understand what the machine was meant to be about, and they were just trying to ape something which they hadn't really got with, and therein lies the lies the fault.
By the early 50s, the Italian-style machine was rolling on a wave of modernism throughout Europe. The streamlined jet set were going places. In the process of mobilizing Italy, the Vespa and the Lambretta had mobilized the youth of the world. This was no accident. Scootering was engineered to be more than a form of transportation. The scooter was conceived as a major social appliance. It became a popular pastime. The manufacturers pushed this hard, encouraging scooterists to join their clubs. The Lambretta Club of Great Britain pulled out its own magazine, The Jet Set. Rallies, runs, games and even beauty contests were staged, all extending the glamorous image purveyed in scooter advertising.
Well, I think we associate the Vespa so much with, Marcello Mastroianni lookalikes and blasting down the coast road in Amalfi and glamorous women in tight sweaters and tight skirts. You want to suggest what Italy was like in 1956? You take a photograph of a gleaming silver Vespa. I mean, it is just as evocative as a glass of martini or a baby Fiat. This machine actually came to summarize Italy.
The two rivals presented their machines in very similar ways. Around them, they wrapped images which were the antithesis of wartime life.
Vespa.
Inventiamo qualcosa che vi faccia strabiliare, un cocktail fatto di genialità, di dinamismo, di eleganza, di potenza, tutto quello che può darvi la felicità. Prendiamo due ruote e le mettiamo qua, un bel motore che veloce va, poi ci mettiamo un bel fanale ed un clacson dalla voce originale che ti fa. In ogni strada suonerà, scooter linea, nuova linea porterà. Freno a disco, novità. Mischiamo bene tutto quanto ed ecco qua, il motoscooter di gran qualità, con sicurezza e con velocità. In capo al mondo in un festoso giro tondo, la Lambretta in allegria vi porterà.
E dopo la Lambretta che inventiamo?
Inventiamo il Lambretta Twist, Lambretta Twist.
In gonnellino balli Lambretta Twist.
The two rivals presented their machines in very similar ways. Around them, they wrapped images which were the antithesis of wartime life. Freedom, love, burgeoning youth, sex, fun. Scooters for the young and the young at heart.
Contrabbassista tutti insieme fanno il Lambretta Twist. In riva al mare con il Lambretta Twist. A lavorare con il Lambretta Twist. Anche all'altare con la sposa puoi andare. Questo è l'anno in cui trionfa il Lambretta Twist.
The carefree, idealized advertising image of the scooter distanced it even further from the old macho motorcycle. Its simple, clean usability was designed to pull in a whole new group of consumers, women.
Mrs. Smith, housewife. She puts her Vespa to work during the week also. Shopping's not only quicker, it's fun. And for the price of a bus ticket, she gets door-to-door service and over 100 miles to every gallon of petrol.
The scooter's relationship to women was often contradictory. While women were encouraged to take control of these machines, they were still used as an adornment. Sell to the women on the easy-to-use values, sell to the men using good old sex.
Vespa's cheap to run, up to 130 miles a gallon, and what a smooth ride. Get your hair cut, you horrible little man! 6 different models to choose from. A Vespa is the in thing to be out of. Inspect a Vespa yourself. And go, Vespa!
The two companies also pushed the customer to live the jet-set image of their PR films.
Jill, June, Jane and Jean, like all jays, are migrating birds. They're scooting off for a half-day holiday in France. Neat little models, eh? 12 stone, that's all they weigh. And what a chassis to delight the eye. The scooters, we mean. More motorcyclists are going for a spin across the briny than ever before. It's an idea which appeals to a girl who's slender in the purse as well. Under a fiver is all it will cost each of these lovelies to take her scooter to the continent and back.
The idea of travelling around sunny Europe on these things was extremely attractive. They carried quite a lot of luggage. There was space for a rack on the back and a rack on the front. You could even have luggage carrying capacity where there was a gap in the step-through frame. It was an extremely seductive way of travelling. I'm not sure it was as nice once you were actually doing it, but it certainly it looked that way from the way in which they were promoted.
Piaggio and Innocenti did more than make a stylish product and present it stylishly. The packaging went further. They ensured scootering lived up to its problem-free, easy-to-use image. An international network of dealers and workshops were set up. You didn't need to get your hands dirty with a scooter.
It doesn't work. Now what'll I do? All you have to do is to find the nearest Lambretta service station. And of course, here is an Innocenti placard which tells you exactly where it is. This is the visiting card of every Innocenti dealer and sub-agent.
Say, there's something wrong. The motor backfires. It's not pulling and it won't start.
Oh, that's terrible. Ronnie.
The other key thing was that the wheels being small meant that you could carry a spare. Now, this was, of course, unheard of on a motorcycle, and the fact that the wheels at the front and the back were identical meant that if you got a puncture, you simply changed the wheel, just like a car. It was a much more convenient, user-friendly machine all round because of these changes.
Great pains were taken to display the supposedly feminine machine's masculine prowess by overcoming the hardest obstacles. Scooters took part in the 600-mile Milan-Taranto race and even held their own Isle of Man TT. Soon the public were aping the manufacturers' stunts, doing their best to break these seemingly unbreakable machines. Customization and accessorization were also becoming popular by the late 50s, and the manufacturers offered a large range of clip-on extras. The threatening, heavily customized scooters of the early 60s grew out of this innocent trend. Eddie Grimstead, an East London dealer, turned the trend into an art form. Mr. Grimstead is an unconscious prophet of the new pop and anti-art movement among the young. The relationship of the scooter to the mods is much more complex than whip aerials or foxtails. The mods, like any other youth movement in the early 60s, had to get around. They had to be seen at cafes, clubs and dances. They had to look smart. The mods were into anything Italian. Haircuts, suits and frothy coffee. They adopted the scooter because it was clean. It kept the mud off their zoot suits and it symbolised the modern world. The mod association with the scooter, although initially positive, turned sour. The motorbikers' disdain for the scooter only heightened the mod rocker divide. After the clashes of '64, the scooter had a new meaning. The real nail in the scooter's coffin was much more subtle. The Mini. Cheap transport for the masses, but this time with 4 seats and a roof. It had all the attributes of modern style: little wheels, smoothed off edges, bright fancy colours. Ironically, Innocenti started making the Mini under licence in Italy. When the company got into financial trouble in 1973, the terms of the Mini deal meant that British Leyland took them over. BL saw the Lambretta as a gimmick and stopped production. The establishment pulled the plug, but the mods got the blame anyway. The Vespa fared little better, and sales declined from the mid-60s onward. Piaggio continued to produce the Vespa in competition with the Japanese. The Lambretta is still made under licence, but now in India. It continues to mobilise developing nations. The scooter's success was founded on its fashionability, but that was also its tragic flaw. In the end, the Vespa and the Lambretta simply went out of fashion.